"Do you think I'm a fool, man? You could just kill me right now and take the mansion for yourself, and no one would say a word." Zhang replied that he wasn't stupid enough to kill the son of the city's richest man. He knew very well that the blizzards would be over soon, so he wanted to use this opportunity to become friends with Simming. That way, once this disaster was over, he could live the rest of his life comfortably since his friend would be a billionaire. Simming seemed to be buying into his words and told Zhang that he had liked him since the first time they met. But Zhang didn't stop there. He decided to keep talking to make sure Simming was fully convinced. He told Simming that he was sure this disaster would end soon, just like any crisis before it, and then the world would go back to the way it was. The rich would live comfortably, while the poor would starve to death. Since Zhang had been poor his whole life, he preferred being rich, even if it was just for once. At that point, Simming got excited and said that not only would Zhang be rich if he teamed up with him, but he was also ready to make Zhang a manager at one of his father's companies. Simming started thinking to himself that Zhang was probably afraid of his status in society and definitely wouldn't dare to kill him. Pushing these thoughts aside, Simming asked Zhang exactly what his demands were in order to cooperate. Our protagonist replied that all he wanted was the password that opened everything in the mansion so he could move around freely. Simming told him that his request was reasonable, but he had to promise not to kill him first. Zhang swore that he would let him live since he was an atheist anyway, and added that he would never kill his future friend. Simming felt immense pressure and found it hard to trust Zhang, but he had to accept the deal because he didn't have any other option. A few moments later, we see them going to the control room and Simming starts giving him the password. Once Zhang entered it, he declared that he was now officially the owner of this badass fortress. Then Simming called out to him, asking him to untie him since he had given him what he wanted. Zhang replied, "I'm at your service, man. Give me just 1 second to grab the knife." But as soon as he brought the knife, he slashed Simming's throat, saying, "That'll teach you to trust an atheist again." As Simming was dying, Zhang kept talking to him, telling him to breathe slowly so the dying part wouldn't be as painful. Simming was taking his last breath, looking confused, and asked why Zhang betrayed and killed him after he gave him everything he asked for. Zhang replied as if he was reading his mind, telling him it was impossible to keep him alive when he had absolutely no use for him. After taking care of him, Zhang went and took care of his friend Lin too. Zhang thought to himself that he had gotten rid of the 2 important targets, and now only Ziyuhao was left. A few seconds later, Ziyuhao opened his eyes, started looking around, and asked, "Who am I and where am I?" He saw Zhang mopping the floor and asked if he had successfully taken care of Simming. When he found out what happened, he was amazed and said he couldn't believe Zhang took them down that easily. Zhang replied that this Simming kid was just a total lightweight and getting rid of him was a piece of cake. But it looked like Ziyuhao wasn't paying attention to his words and was too busy kicking Simming's body to get back at him for the bullying he endured in the past. Zhang called out to him, stopping his thoughts, and told him to take the resources inside the bag as a reward. Ziyuhao was over the moon when he opened the bag and saw the massive amount of supplies inside. He thanked Zhang and said that from now on, he was at his service and would do whatever he asked. Zhang replied that sadly, their journey together ended right here because the resources and energy left in the mansion were running low. He told Ziyuhao to take his stuff and the resources he just gave him and leave, since the electricity was barely enough for Zhang himself. Hearing this, Ziyuhao lost it, claiming that Zhang was definitely lying to keep all the resources for himself, and started getting angrier and angrier. Ziyuhao told him that if it weren't for him, he would never have found this mansion, so he wouldn't let Zhang kick him out and take everything for himself. Zhang replied with an Egyptian proverb, meaning he shouldn't push his luck before Zhang even finished speaking, only to be surprised when Ziyuhao actually pushed his luck, bringing in his donkey and horse. Ziyuhao told him that if Zhang kicked him out of the house, he would tell everyone where he was and expose his superpowers too. Zhang just stood there baffled and thought to himself, did this punk forget that I have a gun and could blow his brains out right now? But since Ziyuhao just kept running his mouth and complaining, Zhang pulled out his gun and blew his brains out to shut him up. Ziyuhao dropped dead on the floor because he didn't know when to keep his mouth shut. Zhang said he had actually planned to let him live, but Ziyuhao forced his hand. After that, our protagonist went to the home theater and sat by himself to think things through. He realized he had taken over the place, and all he had to do now was go and bring Joe over. As for his old building, he would leave it to Uncle Lao. This way, he would pay him back for all his past favors and for saving his life, and he'd have someone he trusted to guard the Building 25 shelter while he was away. Even so, he still had to find a nice girl for Uncle Lao to keep him company and liven up the place as soon as possible. Then Zhang turned on the TV to see what was happening in the apocalypse. He was shocked to see that the TV was broadcasting European channels. Zhang couldn't believe his eyes since the signal was supposed to be weak. How could Simming's TV have all the channels in the entire world? When he went to look for the source of this strong signal, he discovered some incredibly powerful devices broadcasting these channels and providing super-fast internet to the mansion. Zhang was over the moon, saying he could finally browse the web and play League of Legends. Browse the web and check the latest news on the blizzards. He immediately rushed over to the computers and found out from them that only 25% of the world's population was still alive, and everyone else was dead. From this, Zhang made a genius Sherlock-level deduction. If things kept going like this, less than 5% of the population would survive the disaster. But his thoughts were interrupted when he realized there was something even more important: the spread of mutated humans all around the world. He was now certain that his theories about superpowers were absolutely right. The problem was that the powers some of them gained made them lose their human form and turn into monsters. Even though the number of superpowered individuals worldwide wasn't that big yet, he was sure that many of them were hiding their powers just like he was. Because of this, Zhang decided he really needed to stay hidden with his ability, as the military might start hunting down people with powers in the future to run tests on them. Once he finally pulled himself out of his thoughts, he took the sled and headed toward Building 25 to bring Joe back. But on his way, he heard a woman calling out to him. He quickly spun around to see who it was and raised his gun at her. The girl was startled and told him to wait a second and just listen to what she had to say. Zhang couldn't believe his eyes when he realized it was the famous actress Mai, and asked her just to make sure. She confirmed it and explained that she hadn't eaten anything in 3 whole days, and if things went on like this, she would die of hunger. Zhang didn't believe her at first, then told her that everything came with a price in these tough times. She replied that she was ready to agree to any condition as long as she got to eat, and gave him the puppy dog eyes so he couldn't refuse. And just like that, Zhang couldn't say no because she was his celebrity crush, and told her to come with him since he decided to help her out. Without wasting any time, he said, "That's it." Zhang took Mai to Siming's mansion. When she asked him how he had the key to the place, he told her that he was the new owner of the house and told her not to ask too many questions. But once she got inside the mansion, she asked him again if he was Siming's friend or something. At that point, Zhang changed the subject and asked her if she had any kind of relationship with Siming. Mai quickly changed her tone when she realized that Zhang might kill her too if she turned out to be one of Siming's enemies. She began to say that she only knew him casually, and that whenever she saw him, they would just say hello. Zhang replied that if her relationship with him was truly casual, she needed to stop asking about him. All she needed to know right now was that he was the current owner of the mansion. Mai thought to herself that she needed to stop getting involved in his business and focus right now on making him like her, so she could live comfortably until the disaster was over. She went and took a shower, since hot water was a rare thing in this day and age. When she came out, she started executing her plan and asked Zhang to let her live with him. To convince him, she started putting on a cute act, giving him puppy dog eyes and saying she just wanted to stay with him until the disaster ended. Zhang laughed and told her that this disaster wasn't going to end anytime soon, and even after the blizzards passed, the world would never go back to the way it was. So as long as she was staying in the mansion, she would do whatever she wanted, wherever she wanted. I mean, seriously, bro, please tell me this story isn't turning into a harem like the rest of the Chinese web novels. After they finished drinking their milk tea together, Zhang gave her a dress he pulled out from his storage dimension. The girl was amazed and asked him how he did that, but he just laughed and told her he used to be a magician when he was a kid. Then they started eating, and Zhang filled the entire table in front of her with food before making it clear that if she was going to live with him from now on, all she had to do was follow his orders to the letter, and there was no such thing as saying no. She replied that he didn't need to worry, as she was an actress and knew very well that to get anything, she had to give something in return. Even so, she had a few conditions before she could accept Zhang's offer. First, their relationship would only last until the end of the blizzards, and after that, he couldn't tell anyone what happened between them so her reputation as a famous actress wouldn't be ruined. Zhang told her that was super simple, and that he had no problem with it. She felt encouraged and said her second condition was that he shouldn't try to pull any weird, perverted stunts without her permission. Zhang walked up to her, got close, and said, "What did you say, girl? Weren't you the one hitting on me first anyway?" But despite the comment, he reassured her and made it clear that he wasn't a creep, and that she would just be his backup girlfriend. The next morning, after they finished their second cup of milk tea, Zhang told her that he was going out for a while and would be back soon. Mai looked worried in case someone attacked the house and asked when he would be back. Zhang said he was just going to pick someone up and wouldn't be gone long. He asked her if she knew any famous or rich people living nearby. Mai answered that almost everyone living in that area had a net worth of at least 1 billion yuan. Zhang explained to her that he needed a nice girl for his friend since his wife had passed away and he was in a bad place. Since Mai was a celebrity, she definitely knew a lot of eligible ladies. Mai answered nervously, saying she only knew women who were a bit older, mostly out of fear that if she suggested women around her own age, Zhang might replace her with them. But Zhang reassured her and clarified that his friend was in his 40s and wanted someone mature. So she told him she had the perfect match for him, Hai Yan, the famous veteran actress. Zhang had a crush on her too when he was younger, so he agreed and told Mai to call her immediately to come over so he could pick her up. She made the call right away, and Hai Yan arrived. Once Hai Yan arrived at the mansion, Zhang seemed like he was going to go back on his word and keep her for himself. But then he pulled out some resources and told her that these were hers, and promised to keep providing her and Lao with supplies regularly if she accepted his offer. Hai Yan immediately agreed without even knowing the details. Zhang said he expected that response since he knew rich people like her were smart. However, he warned her that if he found out she leaked the secrets of his superpowers, or the fact that he had a massive amount of resources, she could consider herself dead, or rather, both of them could consider themselves dead. Meanwhile, near the city of Yanshi, we see a group of people digging through the ice. They pull out their heavy-duty drilling machine, which is connected to 5 small sleds, each pulled by 2 dogs. One of the men makes the dogs run as fast as they can, explaining that they are using the kinetic energy generated by the dogs to power the drill. Within moments, the drill successfully breaks through the ice, revealing a large number of fish beneath it that are either already dead or about to freeze to death from the cold. When they finish, one of the guys calls his uncle to say that the people in the city must be freezing to death. His uncle replies that the city folks are fools who don't even know how to grow crops, so he's sure that the last people to survive the end of the world will be farmers like them. After all, they've always been used to eating from the sweat of their own hands, and no matter how tough life gets, they can survive as long as they can work. But their thoughts are interrupted when the young guy hears what sounds like a vehicle coming from the city. Looking closely, he's shocked to see an ice sled, and right behind it is Haiyan, the wife-to-be of Mr. Lau. Zhang also noticed them and couldn't believe that these fishermen and farmers had managed to adapt to the freezing temperatures. But his thoughts were cut short when he saw the sled being chased by some villagers. Zhang realized their target was his ice sled, so he told Haiyan to hold on tight because he was about to speed up. When one of the villagers noticed that Zhang was pulling away, he fired a harpoon from his ice drilling rig, warning Zhang that he'd shoot to kill if he didn't stop. He didn't even wait for Zhang to react and opened fire, but luckily, Zhang managed to dodge the harpoon at the last second. However, because of the sudden swerving to dodge the shot, Haiyan lost her balance and fell right off the sled. Zhang was forced to stop and face the villagers, as he couldn't just leave Lau's future wife behind and run off. At that moment, the villagers stopped too and told him to hand over the sled and the woman if he wanted to live. Zhang pulled his gun on them, telling them he didn't want any trouble and that if they left him alone, he would just leave and they wouldn't get hurt. But sadly, the villagers were blinded by greed after seeing the famous actress and the ice sled. One of them stepped forward and told Zhang that since he was passing through their village territory, he had to pay a toll to cross safely, and the price would be either the ice sled or the woman. Zhang replied with total confidence that he had a gun and wasn't forced to listen to them. But one villager pointed out that there were too many of them, and Zhang wouldn't be able to take them all down. Zhang realized that if this dragged on, their backup would arrive and things would get much worse. So he decided to pull out a second gun from his storage dimension and started raining down a barrage of bullets from both guns to give them no chance to attack. Suddenly, one of them freaked out, realizing that Zhang wasn't messing around, and he took out a large number of them. He ordered the dogs to quickly attack Zhang before he could finish them all. But what the old guy didn't know was that Zhang had a powerful superpower, which he quickly used to absorb all the dogs into his storage dimension. This left Haiyan terrified, as she didn't understand the source of Zhang's power and was afraid she might get hit too. Within seconds, Zhang finished locking them up. Haiyan got back on the sled, and they sped away from the scene. As they traveled, Zhang thought to himself that he could keep the dogs in the storage dimension for a little longer since they were much smaller than humans. Even though he knew they would still die within minutes just like the humans, he wanted to know exactly how long they would last. This was because if he figured that out, he might be able to calculate the time dilation difference between the real world and his storage dimension. Meanwhile, another group of villagers reached the scene of the bodies. They were baffled, looking all over the surrounding area, but couldn't find any trace of their dogs. They started getting worried because they knew the dogs were raised in their Wujia village and would never just run away. But the uncle stepped in, telling them to focus on what mattered. They had to avenge the men who were killed. Plus, he suspected that this guy possessed a superpower, just like Chun in their village, and they needed to report what happened to the village chief as soon as possible to find a solution. If we shift over to Wujia village, we see a massive medieval-style castle. Inside, we find Chun asleep, hugging a picture of Snow White after separating her from the 7 dwarfs. The village chief walks in, having learned what Zhang did to his men, but finds Chun asleep with the picture. This makes the chief lose his temper, yelling at him to wake up. When Chun doesn't respond, the chief pulls the blanket off him and tells him to stop being a creep. The chief adds that all the women in the village would fall for him because he has a superpower, yet he rejects them all just for Snow White. After a good scolding, Chun, the miserable guy whom no one leaves alone, wakes up and asks the chief what he wants. The chief points to a guy named Hai and tells him to explain what he saw to the weirdo Chun. Hai wastes no time and starts explaining that today, while they were fishing, they ran into a badass kid who wiped out 4 of their men all by himself. Annoyed, Chun says they just signed peace treaties with all the neighboring villages, so who the hell killed their men? Hai replies that the attacker was from a completely different city, not a neighboring village. Pausing for a moment, the village chief stands up and says that this guy killed 4 men and 8 dogs by himself, meaning there's a high probability he has a superpower just like Chun. Chun, living in his own anime world, replies that it's very possible, as he thinks he's the chosen, badass protagonist of the story, and therefore must have a strong enemy, like a demon king. Even though all the village elders are dying of laughter, they try to hold it in so Chun doesn't get upset and refuse to help them. The village chief decides to play along with Chun's game, telling him that he is the only one who can help them defeat the demon king, Zhang. The rest of the elders start buttering him up, telling Chun he's the badass hero and must help them. Let's leave them fawning over him and go back to Zhang and Haiyan as they arrive in front of building 25. Zhang tells her that her new place will be on the 24th floor. Haiyan feels a bit disappointed, thinking she never imagined she would sell herself out just to survive. When they enter the house, Joe greets them, welcoming him back with great enthusiasm, even though Haiyan saw Joe, she didn't say a word and instead asked Zhang if he wanted something to eat or drink. Zhang then turned his attention to Haiyan, telling her to wait for him while he went to check on Lao. On the way there, Joe started saying that she didn't know he was into mature women. Trust me, I'm dying to use the word that rhymes with chick to describe her, but I'll keep it clean as requested, boss. Zhang replied that Haiyan was just a temporary guest, but he really did like mature women because they are sensible and level-headed. Hey man, we're mixing things up using words like girls, women, and chicks to keep the vocabulary fresh, so don't get annoyed with us. After that, Zhang asked Joe about Lao's physical condition. She told him that his recovery speed was so high that he had completely healed, even though his injury was supposed to take 3 months to return to normal. She added that she kept giving him painkillers as requested, and while she was able to control his power at first, it started getting out of hand as his power kept growing. Zhang began to worry and asked Joe if any physical changes had happened to Uncle Lao. Ever since he saw how abilities were turning people into monsters, he was afraid he might turn into the Hulk. But Joe stepped in and reassured him that Lao was still the same, just with increased power. When Uncle Lao came in, Zhang told him about what happened and how he took control of Simink's mansion. Lao was amazed and said that rich people really do live their whole lives like kings. Zhang replied that the only people who could survive this disaster were the rich, who had built themselves shelters and mansions to protect themselves from the end of the world. Zhang then changed the subject and asked Lao about the changes in his body. Lao, acting like a total badass, lifted his shirt and showed Zhang that he had an amazing six-pack and that the bullet wounds had healed completely. He felt way stronger than before, but the problem was that this strength made him feel like a monster. Zhang stepped in and clarified that he had gained a superpower too, and that it was a good thing, not a bad one. Zhang then showed him his own power, the storage dimension, explaining that many people had gained abilities. Lao was amazed and said that now he finally understood why Zhang always had a never-ending supply of resources. But unfortunately, while he was talking, he got so excited that he slapped his hands hard on the hospital bed, which caused it to break under his massive strength, sending him crashing to the floor. Seeing what happened, Zhang told him to go easy on himself, man, and warned him that he would get used to the power over time. Meanwhile, Zhang thought to himself that the stronger Lao got, the safer he would be, even after the appearance of other superpowered individuals. While Zhou and Haiyan were getting to know each other, they heard Zhang's voice telling Lao that he had found him a bride he would like. When Lao came out and saw that the bride was none other than the famous actress Haiyan, he couldn't believe his eyes. Still, he tried to act casual, although he was nervous and kept nodding his head like a total creep. After they were introduced, Zhang stepped in and played the part of a matchmaker, declaring Lao and Haiyan husband and wife for better or worse, all while Lao was still looking a bit creepy. Once Zhang finished his speech, he told Lao that the building was theirs from now on, and that he would take Zhou and leave. Lao replied that there was no way he could accept that, since the place was the result of Zhang's hard work alone. But our protagonist explained that he had found a better place, as he had mentioned before, and wanted to leave him the house rather than leave it completely empty. Zhang then turned to Zhou and told her to pack up. Zhang told him that the gifts weren't over yet. When they went outside, Zhang explained that he would give him this sled as a gift so he could easily gather resources whenever he wanted. But Lao tried to argue that he couldn't accept all these gifts at once, and if he gave him the sled, Zhang wouldn't have anything to ride to his own mansion. Without a word, Zhang pulled out an even larger ice sled and told him, "Don't worry about it, Uncle Lao, you take this one." Zhang and Zhou then immediately hit the road toward the new mansion. On the way, Zhou kept asking about the mansion's appearance and design. Zhang replied that it was like a fancy, luxury mansion belonging to a top celebrity, and that she would be amazed when they arrived. Zhou told him that now she finally understood why he was so willing to give his old building to Lao. However, Zhang clarified that he only let Lao borrow the place, he didn't give it to him completely. He added that if they needed it at any time in the future, they could take it back. Then he told her that another woman would be living with them in the new mansion. At that moment, Zhou got furious and asked him if he was already sick of her. Zhang replied that she was overreacting, and that she could just consider the girl as someone who would help with chores so she wouldn't feel overwhelmed. Then he flipped into romantic hero mode, promising that he would never forget the one who stood by his side and helped him, and that she was the only one in his heart, while the rest were just background characters. Just to keep things family-friendly, let's keep it cool, boss. While they were sitting in the sled, sharing romantic moments, Zhou noticed that the blizzards had suddenly intensified out of nowhere. Zhang looked to the side and realized it wasn't a blizzard at all. It was an attack launched by someone with a superpower just like his. Even though the impact almost flipped the sled, Zhang used his power in the nick of time to absorb the attack. Right after that, they were surprised by an even larger ice tornado hurtling toward them at lightning speed. Zhang was sure this was another attack by someone with abilities, but he kept his cool and said that no one could hurt him as long as he stayed focused and absorbed the attacks at the right time. Since the previous attack was aimed at him with high precision, Zhang was certain that the attacker was hiding nearby. To get an edge, he spun the sled around and prepared to absorb the ice tornado attack as it came from behind. Nearby, we see Chun, who was baffled by what he just witnessed. He was sure his attack had hit Zhang, but it had vanished in an instant. Since the tornado attack consumed a large portion of his energy, Chun decided to retreat for now, telling the villagers that Zhang had a power just like his, and that they should leave and attack again only after gathering more information about his ability. On the other side, Zhang pulled out his trusty machine gun and said that since the attacks had stopped, this was his chance to check the area. He put on his thermal vision goggles, allowing him to spot any living creatures nearby. With them, he noticed 3 people hiding behind a small ice ridge. Zhang stepped out of the sled, fully prepared to engage them, and started raining a barrage of bullets without warning. Because of Zhang's sharp aim, one of the villagers took a bullet to the leg. Despite the serious injury, he was a tough guy and warned the others not to step in because Zhang had a heavy machine gun. Chun poked his head out to check out the machine gun, looking confused because he couldn't figure out how Zhang had pinpointed their location just by using the gun. At the same time, Zhang said they looked like they would probably keep hiding like rats. To flush them out, Zhang decided to fire back the tornado he had absorbed earlier. At that moment, Chun was in a state of shock, panic, and total denial at what he was seeing. Even so, he quickly snapped out of it and rushed out, countering Zhang's tornado with one of his own. Since the 2 attacks were equal in power, they completely canceled each other out, giving Chun the chance to scurry away like a scared rat. Seeing him running off, Zhang said he had no choice but to let him get away this time because chasing him could get a bit risky, especially since Zhou was in the sled and he couldn't leave her alone. Even so, he raised his voice and told the villagers that he would be waiting for them if they wanted revenge for their fallen men. But he warned them that if they came to his home, he would take them all down because he'd be fully prepared. After wrapping up the fight, our hero got back in the sled with Zhou. On the way, he thought to himself that he needed to get used to fighting other superpowered individuals like Chun, as he was sure he'd be getting into a lot more fights like this in the future. But his thoughts were interrupted by Zhou, who said she was worried that the people who fled might come back for revenge. Zhang reassured her, telling her they'd think twice, make that 1,000 times, before trying anything, especially after seeing his power in action. Still, Zhou couldn't calm down and said that since Chun could control ice and wind, she was afraid he might attack the mansion and bury them underneath it. Zhang replied that she would change her mind once she saw the mansion, and even if it got buried underground, nothing would happen to them, and their lives inside wouldn't be affected at all. Plus, Zhang was confident his ability was way stronger than Chun's. Time flew by and Zhang finally reached the mansion. He went to Mai's room and found her still awake. He told her to get up because he wanted to introduce her to someone. Mai panicked and was about to say that she wasn't into that kind of thing, but Zhang caught the expression on her face, started laughing, and reassured her that the person he brought was a woman, not a man. Once Mai heard that, she put on her best outfit, got dressed up, and told herself that she would be the girl of everyone's dreams. She figured that if she tried hard enough, Zhang might pick her over his other girlfriend. She grabbed her makeup and started getting ready for the ultimate showdown with Zhou over Zhang's heart. On the other side, when Zhang went downstairs to check on Zhou, he found her putting on makeup and getting completely glammed up too. He realized what was going on and thought to himself that this competition would definitely work to his advantage. But the weird thing was that when Mai came down, they realized that she and Zhou already knew each other. Zhou marched toward Mai looking furious as if she were about to hit her. Zhang stepped in to break up the tension, asking Zhou if they knew each other or were related. Zhou replied, looking annoyed, "She's my cousin." Zhang was surprised and asked why Zhou wanted to strangle Mai if they were cousins. Zhou explained that there was a family feud between them, which is why she didn't like her. Meanwhile, Mai started whispering to Zhang, asking him not to say anything about the deal they had made in front of Zhou. When Zhang asked her why, she explained that her family, the Zhou family, was famous for its massive achievements in science and medicine, and that ever since she decided to enter the world of entertainment and acting, her family wanted to disown her. Before she could finish her sentence, Zhou started yelling at the top of her lungs, saying that Mai had caused them huge problems, and because of her, the Zhou family had become a laughingstock among all the other high-class families. Zhang stood there listening to the whole argument, thinking to himself, why did I get myself mixed up in this mess? Man, the day I got promoted and became a small warehouse manager, I was insanely happy. And now you guys come at me talking about rich families and high class and all that nonsense. Anyway, he decided to step in just to keep things chill and avoid a headache. He said he actually likes acting and actors, and he doesn't see them as bad people. Zhou replied that she doesn't have any issue with actors who got famous because they're actually good, but Mai, Her acting is trash, and people only watch her movies to check out her body. At that moment, we see Zhang looking at Mai, trying hard not to laugh, saying Joe kinda has a point, but he can't take her side or things might escalate. So he snapped out of it and told Juno he doesn't want to hear anything about this topic again. From now on, they're just two distant relatives from some unknown family with unclear jobs. Then he added that they need to take care of this mansion from now on, especially the crop-growing room, since it's gonna play a huge role in their survival. After that, he asked Joe to go fix up the room on the second floor because she'll be sleeping there. When Joe left, Mai started thanking Zhang for not exposing their deal in front of her. She also asked him not to mention what happened between them, or that whole milk tea thing in front of Joe. Zhang put on his nice guy face and told her he respects her decisions and will keep her secret, but deep down, he knew very well that there are only 3 people in that mansion. Sooner or later, his relationship with Mai is definitely gonna come out, whether he says anything or not. After that, Mai said she'd go cook something since Joe was busy, but when she got to the kitchen, she found no supplies at all. She was confused because she clearly remembered seeing a lot of resources there before. What she didn't know is that Zhang never leaves supplies out after storing them. He doesn't want either her or Joe to betray him or anything. He wants them to stay dependent on him. A few moments later, Zhang showed up and started pulling out a bunch of ingredients from storage, telling her she could cook all of that. And after a while, Mai finished cooking and called them to eat. That's when Zhang told Joe to get ready to try a famous actress's cooking. But the moment Joe took her first bite, she was like, "Damn, this is nasty," and asked Mai why she added so much salt.